With the 8th overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft, the Carolina Panthers don't trade back. They don't go defense. Instead, they go for wide receiver, Tetairoa McMillan. Yeah, that just happened.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcoming into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here live on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council. We're typically on Fridays. I'm answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, but the draft is going on this weekend, so we'll get back to the mailbag next Friday. Either way, all you got to do this weekend is at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council or at me over on Blue Sky at Julian Council to get your questions in for next week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find a qualified candidate you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. Wow is what I have to say about night one of the NFL draft for your Carolina Panthers. I did not see that coming. We spent months, weeks on this show discussing the possibility of a trade back for Carolina, and it appeared that's what they were looking to do at 8th overall, but they were not able to trade back, and we'll get into why that did not happen here later on the show. But the Panthers clearly were interested in moving down the draft board more so than moving up or staying put at 8. There was a ton of talk about Jalon Walker for the last month plus. Every single mock draft that you were looking at up until yesterday on Wednesday was saying Jalon Walker was going to Carolina. Dan Morgan was asked about him, said how they saw him as an outside linebacker and how he would fit here in Carolina. Would make a ton of sense. His dad being a college coach, living up in Salisbury, it would have made a ton of sense for Carolina to go out there and get someone who could be an edge rusher and then also potentially play off-ball linebacker, be that hybrid leader for this defense for years to come. But Jalon Walker's on the board. Carolina said, no, we don't want Jalon Walker. He's not high enough for us. We can't trade back. We're stuck. So what did they do? Well, with the 8th overall pick, they took a wide receiver, Arizona wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan. And I was stunned because of all the things I had just said before, that we had seen Jalon Walker mocked for over a month here. You looked out on Wednesday, Matt Miller is mocking Walter Nolan from Ole Miss to Carolina. Daniel Jeremiah is mocking Mason Graham from Michigan to Carolina. No one was saying Tetairoa McMillan. Or was it one person, Field Yates, who did say Tetairoa McMillan? And I looked at that and I was like, okay, well, that's interesting that Field would put that out there, and that Field believes that Carolina, instead of building off of a defense that was the worst in NFL history when it came to scoring defense, that what they should do was to focus on the offense and continue to build around their quarterback, which that's not something that Carolina said they wouldn't do. Let's go all the way back to February, when Dan Morgan, the Panthers GM and president of football operations, was speaking to the media up in Indianapolis for the annual scouting combine. He was asked about the defense, which clearly, after allowing the most points again in the history of the NFL, allowing 3,000 yards rushing and just being absolutely putrid and devoid of overall talent, they needed to add to every single level of the defense, which eventually they did do. But Dan did sit up there and told the media, told you, told me, told all of us that while there were obvious needs on the defensive side of the ball, they were not going to neglect the offensive side of the ball this offseason, whether that was in free agency, and you looked and saw that they brought back Austin Corbett, they brought back Cade Mays, shockingly, Brady Christensen back, they brought in Rico Dowdle off of a career year rushing for 1,000 yards last year in Dallas. They did not neglect the offensive side of the ball, but certainly they didn't put in the same amount of assets they put into the defensive side of the ball during free agency. But tonight, that's what they did. They looked at their young quarterback, who apparently they called after making this pick to let him know, we're getting you another playmaker, Bryce. They looked at him and what he did in the final 9 weeks of the season last year and said to themselves, we need to get him more playmakers. We cannot just be satisfied with Adam Thielen at 35 years old, with Xavier Legette, who showed promise, but we want to see more from him this year, with Jalen Coker, who was an undrafted free agent, who got cut from the team, then made the team and made an impact this season, and David Moore, who had his best season since the pandemic. We cannot be satisfied with those four. We need to add a player who adds a different element to this offense, and that's why they decided to get Tetairoa McMillan with the 8th overall pick. And as someone who's been constantly bringing up the fact that I didn't think that what they had in the receiver room was enough, I can't sit here and be upset about this pick. All I'm saying is I'm a little surprised just based off of, well, all the things we've talked about for over the last month, and even looking at the mocks from people who truly have sources and know these things, not thinking it was going to be a receiver. Oh, everyone except for Field Yates, who did think this was going to happen for Carolina this evening. But I did think they needed to add another piece. And this was not a free agent wide receiver class that I loved. I know that Darius Slayton was someone who this organization was interested in. He's staying in New York instead, and it's not like that's something Panther fans are going to be weeping about, but the staff, they liked him. They thought that was going to be a realistic free agency target for them to try to raise the floor, not necessarily the ceiling of this group, but I wanted to see them try to get a wide receiver number one, DK Metcalf. That would have made a lot of sense. Of course, that did not work out as he's a Pittsburgh Steeler. Other than that, Chris Godwin never reached free agency. The other receivers out there, not really that sexy of a group in 2025. Certainly a couple of years ago, sign me up for Stephon Diggs, sign me up for Amari Cooper, sign me up for Keenan Allen. But now, no, not really. As far as being a wide receiver one, I'm not that interested in those names, more so than what the players they are today. So what they did tonight is they decided, let's try to get another player who could be that wide receiver one, even though Dave just told us a couple weeks ago at the Breakers down in Palm Beach, Florida, that they believe Xavier Legette could be that. So was that a lie? Is that still what they believe? Do they think that they're not going to have one wide receiver one? They're going to have two. And, well, two is certainly better than one and better than none, which is the case right now as they continue to develop Xavier and see what they get out of Thielen and what could be his final year, not just in Carolina, but in the NFL, and then what Jalen Coker and what David Moore are able to provide. But now you have Tet McMillan a part of the fold. So looking at all of this, like the pros, the cons, you got to go over it. The pros are, first and foremost, they got the best receiver in the draft. You can argue whether it was Matthew Golden, and I would have thought just with the lack of speed that they currently have in this receiving core, and Xavier Legette, he has that speed. We just have not seen it other than, I think, week 3 against the Raiders when he had that nice catch and run. Haven't really gotten to see this kind of speed that we had seen from Xavier Legette back in 2023, his final year at South Carolina, which vaulted him to being selected 32nd overall in the first round a year ago in the draft. We have not seen that come to fruition yet. I do think it's going to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. But outside of him, not a lot of speed. And okay, Matthew Golden would add that kind of speed. Tet McMillan maybe does not do that. But you look at the numbers the last couple of years. PFF put this out there on their Twitter account, a 90.5 PFF grade since 2023. That's third among wide receivers in college the last couple of years. His career, 3 years spent at Arizona. That's a true marker of whether a guy is a dude, because when you can go 3 years in college and then to the pros, well, yeah, you're pretty doggone good. See Travis Hunter, see Drake May last year, see Caleb Williams last year. Those guys who were 3 and done and then going in the top 10, dogs. And that's what they got here. 213 receptions, 3,423 yards, 26 touchdowns. The last 3 seasons at Arizona. Look at the last 2 years when he was an All-American. 90 receptions, 1,402 yards, and 10 touchdowns in 2023. Last year, when he was the offense at Arizona, 23, they won 10 games. Last year, they weren't good at all. 84 receptions, 1,319 yards, 8 touchdowns. So just outstanding the last 2 years. And I sat here, I questioned the pick of Xavier Legette last year because, all right, he had one really good breakout season after spending a lot of time there and not doing anything until the Gator Bowl right before the final year he spent on campus in 2023. So it was like a once in a moon. It finally happened for Xavier Legette, where from Tet McMillan's perspective, his freshman year, 702 yards, 8 touchdowns, then 1,400, then 1,300. He stepped on campus in Tucson, and he made it happen from day one. And we talked about, would Jalen Walker be a fit? Does he have the production? Michael Williams, does he have the production? Shamar Stewart, can't question the production at the wide receiver position when it comes to Tet McMillan and what he did the last couple of seasons. You got to 2023 against Colorado versus Travis Hunter. Now, granted, Travis Hunter had been knocked the hell out against Colorado State earlier that season. You can question how healthy he was, but that day in Boulder, 9 receptions, 107 yards, and a touchdown versus the best corner, arguably the best player in this draft in 2025 against Travis Hunter. So those are the pros. And Dan Morgan, he was asked why they decided to go with a wide receiver at 8 when they could have gone defense or tried to trade back.
Yeah, and it's still a need, and we have 8 more picks. So we wanted to add the best player. We wanted to follow our board of who we thought was going to help us the most up there. So again, we got our guy, and we're excited about it.
They got their guy, and we talk all the time about getting your guy, and do you take him early if you feel like that's what you got to do? Do you show that kind of conviction? And that's what they decided to do. They sat at 8. They weighed their options. They didn't love all the other options out there, and they stuck to their board. And they had told us that after free agency, they felt like they were in position to go BPA, best player available. And that's what they did. They looked at it. They saw that Tet was the highest player ranked on their board. They loved him, and they took him. So I gave you the pros. What about Dan Morgan and Dave Canales? What did they see in Tet McMillan that had him atop their board there at 8?
I think he has really good play speed. I think the thing that pops off the tape about Ted is just how smooth he is, his body control, his ability to adjust to all types of throws, his catch radius, and his hands are elite. He catches everything outside his frame. And he can win the jump ball down the field and in the red zone. He's a guy that has 18 touchdowns the past 2 years. So he puts the ball in the end zone, and obviously that's something that we want to do.
Obviously, yeah. You want somebody who can put the ball in the end zone. He did that 26 times his 3 seasons there in Tucson for the Wildcats. So that's why the Panthers took him, because he's a difference maker. He adds a different element. He has that crazy catch radius. He produced at a high level and All-American level the last couple of years at Arizona, and he was the top player on their board. But, of course, there are cons, and there's a lot of people out there when this pick were made that were saying, I got a tweet that said, at Julian Council, WTF. And I think all of y'all know what that means, even the young children who might be up here at 11:14 p.m. Eastern time watching the show right now on YouTube. A lot of folks are not happy. And I think Tet McMillan is a prime example of what I hate about the NFL draft lead up, as you take a lot of time nitpicking and studying players. And yes, you have to do your due diligence, but a lot of people who aren't even in those organizations do that due diligence, and they find ways to tear down these young men in the biggest spot of their lives. And I've always hated that about the draft, but it is a job interview. There are background checks, and it's important to make sure you're making the right investment, because this is what it is, an investment for your organization when you take these players. So I look at a lot of it. It feels like the well's been poisoned on Tet McMillan, and I do think one of these things are reasonably so. We're going to talk about that momentarily, but certainly there's a concern about, yes, the size. While he may have good play speed, does he have great natural speed at this level? In the Pac-12, RIP, and the Big 12, a little bit different than playing even in the SEC or, hell, the National Football League. So will he be able to get open? A couple of years ago, we saw what happens when your receivers cannot get open. Last year, they did a better job of it, but still, for the most part, this is a plodding group that doesn't have the great kind of speed in separation that you're looking for. But at least you have big body receivers that can help out your quarterback, that in Xavier Legette, and now Tet McMillan. But will the contested catches that he made in college translate to the NFL? And I'm seeing people saying, well, Dave Canales worked with Mike Evans for a year, and now he's going to get his own Mike Evans and Tet McMillan. Last year, he worked with Xavier Legette, with DK Metcalf, and now they're getting their own version in Xavier Legette. Remember all of those comparisons? I'm already seeing all the comparisons to Mike Evans and to Tet McMillan, which probably not fair. Mike Evans is going to have a bust in Canton. Now, he was outstanding when he was down at A&M getting the ball thrown to him by Johnny Football, and they were doing nuts, crazy stuff back then with Kiff Kingsbury calling the plays and Kevin Sumlin as their head coach down there in Aggie Land. So, yeah, I can understand that comparison, but once you get to this point in time in a Hall of Fame career, I don't want to really hear Tetairoa McMillan's name in the same sense as Mike Evans. Yes, as a doing this podcast and excited about him being here. Yeah, you want to hear those comparisons, but as a football fan, let's not do that. That's ridiculous. So that's something that I wonder. He can be a red zone threat. The speed, that's a key question. And the number one question I'm seeing a lot of people putting out there, and this is something that escaped me. I was asked by Kevin Ostreicher when I was doing a quick little hit for Locked On, and it's already on the YouTube page. You can go see it. I didn't know about this supposed quote from Tet McMillan about him not watching football. Well, I was able to find that. And the question about, does he love football? Does he watch it? That's one that's going to be asked. So here is the context to what everyone's talking about when it comes to Tet McMillan and his love for football.
I don't watch football.
You don't watch football? At all?
At all.
Is it hard to watch film then if you don't like watching football?
Yeah.
For real? That's crazy.
I don't like watching film either. I don't ever need to watch it by myself because we go over as a receiver group.
So he doesn't watch football. He doesn't like watching film either, and doesn't in particular like watching film by himself because, well, they watch film together as a receiver group. Yeah, yikes. Obviously not what you want to see and hear from the 8th overall pick in the draft that just came to your team, obviously. So, I don't have the full conversation. That's a YouTube video that's out there. There's probably far more minutes of context, but you take that snippet, it's really hard to defend, and I'm not really trying to do that here right now. We all have jobs. We don't all love our jobs. You can still go in there and do a good job, like my day job at NASCAR. I don't like doing it, but do I go in there? Do I work hard? Yes. Do I do a good job? I think so. So it's very easy to hate your job and to go in. I'm not saying he hates playing football, but it can be tedious. It's a lot you got to put into it. Maybe in your free time, you want to lay on your couch and you want to watch Looney Tunes. I don't know what it is, but I don't think there's an apples-to-apples comparison out there, because I'm sure some of y'all watching right now, listening right now, you have your job, you go to it, you work hard, but is it something that you're trying to think about when you get home? No, but it's completely different, because football is something, especially at the NFL level, you have to put in the work outside of the building. In the offseason, there's not people there making sure that you show up in shape. The offseason is voluntary. Until we get to 3 days, which usually gets reduced to 2 days in June, it's all voluntary. You have then 6 weeks to stay in shape in the summer. It's on you. So you would hope that he is putting in the time and the effort when he's away from the team to get him in position to help the Panthers win football games moving forward. That's what you're hoping to see. But that quote, yeah, it's scary. I can't imagine, though, that Dave Canales and Dan Morgan, but in particular Dave, the way that he's gone about things and all his philosophies, that he signed off on a player who he does not believe puts in the work. So I'll just leave you with this before we take a quick pause.
Speaking to just kind of the lessons learned from one year to the next, we look at the guys that we brought in last year, and they fit the profile of what we want for Panthers football players. And so that's really that commitment, kind of looking at the guys that that just the more that we watched him, the more that you see the different parts of his craft show up. You can tell this is a guy that works on it a lot. For a 6'4" guy to be able to reduce at the top of his routes the way he does, that takes work. And his speed cuts and all those things, that you just kind of see somebody that's working on his game. And so I think just, taking a note out of that and just knowing that we're getting another person that fits into what we're trying to do. And the guy's a baller, and that's like, there's a simple way to look at it. You watch film and the ballers show up, and they make plays in big moments, and they're always looking to do something special.
The ballers show up to make big plays in special moments. And I mean, I butchered that quote, but you heard what Dave Canales had to just say right there. So that's the head coach. That's what he says as far as defending the pick, if he's defending it at all, but saying why the Carolina Panthers took him, what they saw in Tetairoa McMillan. Still, Tet McMillan on camera. That's him saying, I don't watch football. I don't like watching film, and I don't like doing it alone because we already do that in the receiver room. Yeah, that attitude is going to have to change. Otherwise, they're going to have issues in Carolina. So clearly, they're not all the way around concerned about that. And I'd imagine they've seen that before they decided to take him. So that's what Dave had to say. Take it for what you want. All right, let's take a quick pause. We'll come back here, and I will talk. Well, the Panthers had a chance to trade back, and they didn't do it. Why? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back here on Locked On Panthers, Carolina Panthers with the 8th overall pick select Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver out of the University of Arizona. Certainly a shocking decision for Carolina considering all the talk had been about potentially trading back, about getting Jalen Walker in particular, but a defensive player after fielding the worst defense in not just franchise history, but the worst scoring defense in the history of the National Football League. Why not go get another defender? Well, why? Because Tet McMillan was their guy, and they looked at their board, and they decided that at 8, that was the guy to get. But it seemed pretty clear to me, I don't know about y'all, that they were trying to get out of that 8th pick. We look at the top of the draft. It all went the way we thought it would go as far as players go. Cam Ward, number 1 to the Titans. Number 2, the Jags. That was surprising. They were aggressive, moved up to 2nd overall to take Travis Hunter, who everyone thought was going to Cleveland. At 3rd overall, the Giants stayed put, took Abdul Carter. 4th overall, Will Campbell to the Patriots. No surprise there. Then 5th overall, the Browns back on the board, deciding to take Mason Graham. So there was a thought that Mason Graham could go to Jacksonville. Had the Jags stayed there, he was the most commonly player mocked there over the last month. So the top 5, the top 4 at least, as far as Ward, Hunter, Carter, Campbell, going the way we thought it would, just not the teams being in those places with the Jags and Browns swapping. Then Ashton Jeanty goes 6th overall to the Raiders. Armand Mimbo goes to the Jets at 7th overall. And then there's talks from Adam Schefter. 8:43 p.m. this evening, Adam Schefter saying Carolina has been fielding calls about trading the number 8 pick. Then 2 minutes later, after Jeanty goes off the board, 8:45 p.m., Albert Breer saying Carolina's market for the 8th pick will be affected with Ashton Jeanty off the board and to the Raiders. And I told y'all on Thursday's episode, whenever you had seen it, maybe you saw it on Wednesday out on YouTube, and people were getting upset that I put out a free podcast that they're not forced to watch a night early instead of waiting until 7 a.m. to put it out there. Really weird to complain about something like that. But either way, you saw on the final episode I did before the draft, I talked about 2 entities that I thought would dictate Carolina's ability to get out of the 8th pick. One was the Jacksonville Jaguars. And once they moved up to number 2, well, they kind of effed Carolina in that because they weren't staying back at 5 and potentially going with Mason Graham. And had they stayed at 5 and not gotten Travis Hunter, obviously, because he would have gone number 2 to Cleveland, I'm thinking that they may have gone with Tetairoa McMillan, which that had also been something rumored, as it was very clear with their new general manager, James Gladstone, who comes over from the Rams, who are known for saying F them picks. Maybe he's the guy who's been orchestrating it all behind the scenes the last couple of years and actually not less need the Rams general manager. And they also have Liam Cohen. He's an offensive guy. They wanted to make a splash. They did that, but they wanted an offensive player. So maybe Jacksonville was going to take Tet McMillan, and Carolina would not have been in a position to get him in the first place. But then the second entity was Aston Genty. And once you saw that the Jags weren't there to take him at 5 and the Browns went with Mason Graham, you kind of cross your fingers that, oh, maybe he makes it to 8. And, well, the Raiders said, no, we want him here. And they got a playmaker to help out Geno Smith. And we know how much Pete Carroll loves to run the football. And Pete Carroll disciples now here in Carolina talk about how much he loves to run the football as well. But there was still another possibility because 4th overall, Will Campbell from LSU went to the Pats. 7th overall, Armand Mimbo from Mizzou went to the Jets. 2 of the 3 premier tackles in this draft were off the board. So sitting at 8, I'm thinking, all right, who wants Kelvin Banks? Who out there that needs a tackle is trying to get up and take Kelvin Banks? And it seems to me that there were teams that were interested in getting to 8. Were they interested in Banks? I don't know. But in a draft where there's not a ton of star talent, but especially at tackle, you need to get these 3. If you were a team that was tackle, desperate, like needing a starter, it was either going to be Mimbu, Campbell, or Banks. And in order to get those guys, you need to be in the top 10 because right after Carolina took McMillan, the Saints took Kelvin Banks. So I have to imagine there's a team that might have been interested, but it's not just as simple as, oh, well, why did Carolina not trade back? I had one of my friends in our group chat complaining about them not trading back. Well, they, 1, have to have a trade partner. And if they find a trade partner, 2, that trade partner has to have an offer that is agreeable. So it's clear that they had plenty of trade partners. They just didn't have any agreeable offers. And if that doesn't happen, then, well, a trade doesn't happen. Dan Morgan was asked about them fielding trade calls about the 8th overall pick on Thursday night.
We had a few calls. Obviously, you entertain everything. And, at the end of it, we wanted to get our guy. And we're excited about it.
They wanted to get their guy. Okay, but why did you not make a trade?
We had a lot of people sniffing around. I think it would have had to be something above and beyond, for us to kind of pull off this pick. But yeah, that's where we were.
That's where they were. And Dan Morgan was asked about it last week about being stuck with that 8th overall pick and what they would do. And he said if they were stuck in that position, weren't necessarily his words, were the words of the reporter, that they would make a selection, that they would be confident in their board and get their guy. And their guy was Tetairoa McMillan. I still feel like they wanted to move from 8, but once they were stuck there, they looked at their board, saw Tetairoa McMillan, wide receiver, Arizona, was the top guy there, and they took him. With Jalen Walker on the board, they said, no, McMillan's our best guy. We're sticking to that. We're sticking to BPA, best player available, and not necessarily needs. And that is something that surprised me as far as just that he was their best player on the board, not that they necessarily decided to go with the receiver and neglecting other needs. It's just like, oh, he was the top guy. All right. I didn't expect that to be the case. That surprised me more than anything, that sitting there, being stuck, best player available, top of the board was Tet McMillan. So that is why they did not trade back. They had plenty of people calling. They just did not find an agreeable trade. So had trade partners, just not the right trade to make them want to move down the board and to give up the ability to take Tetairoa McMillan. So they loved him more than what they were offered. And I have to wonder, too, there had to have been a threshold. And Dan Morgan was asked about this last week prior to the draft, and he didn't want to answer how far back he was comfortable going down. I would think that like the Broncos were a team at 20 that was talked about that they were trying to get up, and they ended up not doing that. And Houston was supposedly a team that wanted to get a tackle. They ended up actually, I think, trading back, but they were sitting at 25th. I don't think Carolina wanted to go to 20 or to 25 in this draft. So that's why they didn't make a trade. They had opportunities, but the opportunity did not present itself. So Jags didn't really work out in their favor. GT didn't really work out in their favor, but it did work out in their favor that Kelvin Banks was on the board, but just the right trade did not come along. So looking ahead to Friday night in 30 minutes, which, we still have hours after that. How should the Panthers approach day 2? Will they fulfill some of those defensive needs? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Looking at night 2 of the 2025 NFL Draft, the Panthers are going to have the 57th and 74th overall picks. And let me just go over to ESPN.com right now and make sure they have not done anything. Looking at it right now live here, 11:31 on YouTube. And thanks to all the folks with me right now. We have 151 that are in. So appreciate everybody who's tuned in live. Of course, you can always check out any of these shows in your podcast feed afterwards. It should have that up here before midnight. And then if you miss a live show, well, it's going to be right there as well here on YouTube. But looking at it, okay, so edge rushers, that is a spot to look at. Abdul Carter, obviously off the board, 3rd overall. The second one after that, Mykel Williams going 11th overall to San Francisco. And I'm just going to guess this because it's the Niners and they always have great defensive ends. He's going to eat there. Jalen Walker, 15th overall to Atlanta. We'll see how they utilize him. Shamar Stewart to the Bengals at 17th overall. Also looking at James Pierce Jr., the Charlotte native. He is going to the Falcons. So the Falcons picked up 2 edges. Maybe they are looking more at Pierce as an edge. We'll see. So that's where the edge rushers are. So still looking at it, Mike Green, and I had talked to somebody about this. That was going to be a guy who's going to fall because of the off-the-field stuff. And, well, that's what's happening. Does not look like he's going to go in the first round. Donovan Ezeraku, who I loved, he is still out there available for teams. So I don't know at 57 if he's going to be there. I'm looking at the edge rushers right now. According to ESPN.com, Mike Green's a top 1. We'll see when that happens. Donovan Ezeraku, he's still available. Jordan Birch, JT Tuimoloau, Olu Oladejo from UCLA, Nick Scorton from A&M, Landon Jackson. Like, there are still some quality edge rushers that will be available. I just don't know. I mean, there's depth there. And you're looking at production. Green produced at a high level in Sun Belt, but again, a lot of question marks out the field. Ezeraku made it happen 2 years out of 3 in the ACC. Jordan Birch was good for Oregon after transferring from South Carolina. There's guys there. I just don't know. I mean, Kyle Kennard, is that worth taking a flyer on him? He's apparently the 16th as far as ESPN's like remaining edge rushers. That guy was a game wrecker last year in Columbia. Will Campbell, who went 4th overall, he got his ass kicked. I sat there in that end zone at Williams-Brice Stadium that September afternoon and watched Kyle Kennard go off. He won the game. Now, the officiating, certainly questionable. We'll have to rehash that. But Kyle Kennard was the reason why South Carolina should have won that game and kind of did win that game against LSU that day. You cannot tell me that there's 15 guys left on the board that are better than him. You can't even tell me that Shamar Stewart is better than him, who he didn't do anything at A&M. Oh, well, he's pretty. He's chiseled like a Greek god. Make plays. How many guys have not made any damn plays and then come to the NFL and made plays? Not a lot of them. Not a lot. Like Mingo a couple years ago. Didn't make any plays at Ole Miss. And what do you know? He can't play at the NFL level. Shocking. It truly is. Like, come on. Like, Barron Sorrell is not better than Kyle Kennard. If he's on the board, you take him. I don't care if he's undersized, whatever the criticism is. Ball player. Go get that guy if that makes sense for you at 57 or 74. Like, he might be even available at 111. Who the hell knows? So I would think edge would make sense. I don't know if they're getting a game changer at this point in time with what's available. Maybe they are. I still look at that group. Jadeveon Clowney, likely last year in Carolina, I would think this year. DJ Wonnum healthy. There's upside there. Pat Jones a second. I'm not really that excited, but that's another veteran in that room. And I suppose they're better with him than they were without him last year. And then we'll see what DJ Johnson does, I guess. And Amari Barno's still on the roster too. So it's going to be a need again next year. That's going to be what I'm going to say right now. They got rid of Burns. A lot of you are happy about it. Edge rushers weren't good last year. If Williams healthy this year, it should be better. But edge will be a need again next year. Just looking at what else is available, it's going to be a need. So cool. 2 straight years of having no pass rush. Congratulations. Safety, think that's another one to look at. You only have 3 guys. One of them you do not want to play. No offense to Nick Scott and his family. He will help them out special teams wise, help them out in the locker room for sure. You don't really want to play him. Damani Richardson, I think they do want to play him, but I don't think they want him to necessarily be their number 2 safety. They want to have him as their 3rd guy to rotate in there. And Trevon Merrick, he's obviously going to start. I would like to see them try and get a starting safety. And I don't think any safeties. Okay. I know there's other picks that have been made. Let me just look at what's going on right now. I'm still live up here. Okay, Maxwell Harrison. I was kind of worried about that guy, corner from Kentucky, and whether he was going to get taken. As far as safeties go, only Malachi Starks, who went 27th to the Ravens, has been taken. Nick Eamon-Worry, he's still out there. And of course, the Eagles. Do the Eagles need a safety? Because if they do, I mean, come on. We're going to let the Eagles get him, or God forbid, Kansas City. I guess they just got rid of Justin Reed, Justin Reed, right? So if that's the case, then maybe Eamon-Worry is going to the Chiefs. But Eamon-Worry is still available. Can't imagine he's going to be at 57, so probably not going to happen. Kevin Winston Jr., and this, of course, you might be listening to this after I've already closed it out. You could be either watching or listening, so he may have already gone. But Eamon-Worry, I don't think that's going to happen. Winston Jr., Xavier Watts, Jonas Sanker, who did a top 30, Andrew Makuba, he would count as a Clemson player, either him or RJ Mickens. Makuba spent way more time in Clemson than like the 6 months he spent in Austin. A little bit longer. Well, I'm sorry, probably like 8 or 10 months, if that. Jahad Campbell just went to the Eagles. There's safeties out there. So I would love to see them get a safety. Hell, I'll even say this. I know that there's a lot of wondering about why didn't you get a receiver and all of that, or why did you get a receiver? They still don't have a lot of speed. And if you're telling me you get a speedy receiver on day 2, I'm really not going to be that upset, because then you're talking about your future core in 26 after Thielen's gone, likely, is Tet McMillan, Xavier Legette, another speed receiver in there at the slot to replace Thielen, and then Jalen Coker. Feel good about that young foursome. I do. You could. I guess you got to find out who it is and see what they do this year. That could be something. And I look at the guys who are still available. I would think Luther Burden, he's still out there. Luther Burden for sure. Jalen Noel. We talked about Jalen Lane with Kyle Bailey on Monday. But yeah, I would think Luther Burden and Jalen Noel, those are the 2 guys that, sign me up. Where do I sign? That's what I would be looking at. But I don't think it's ever a bad thing to add more playmakers. But again, edge. And I talked about this to close out yesterday's show, or I guess today's show, whenever you listen to it, watch it, whatever. This draft was about not necessarily going and get a bunch of starters, and they've done that at receiver now, because Dave was asked about it. Yeah, he's going to have to earn it, but they didn't draft him to not play. Like, who's going to play over him? Jalen Coker? Come on, let's be real here. I like what Jalen did, but he's not. He was an undrafted guy who they cut. He came back, played well. But they just showed you today that, no, we're still trying to get better at that. And we're not going to just bank on a UDFA from a year ago being one of our starters this year. And he could still be that number 4 guy. He's going to be ahead of David Moore. I think he still gets some quality snaps. They looked at it and they want to get better. So, I mean, I just felt like this was more about building depth and towards the future. And like, that will be a part of the future, hopefully, if things work out. And a safety, that's somebody who can step in right away. But every other position, even if they take an edge, just based on what Mike Kay was telling us on Wednesday, who's to say that edge rusher was going to start? Who's to say that Mason Graham was going to start this year? And whoever they may have taken there at 8 had they not taken Tet. So we'll find out what they decide to do. Dan Morgan, I just one final clip I want to play for you. He did talk about the need for defense and, how they may approach day 2.
And we did attack our defensive needs through free agency. And again, we have eight picks left, and, our board has a lot of defensive guys on there as well. So, definitely not something that we're going to neglect.
Yeah, we've heard that before when he was talking about the defense during the combine, that they're going to obviously address defense, but not neglect offense. And they showed that today by taking Tetairoa McMillan 8th overall. And I think we'll see tomorrow that they're also not going to neglect defense by going out there and maybe even at 57 taking a player, but they will find some defensive players tomorrow night during the draft. So we'll see how all that plays out. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council. I'm back next Friday answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I'll be back live again with you on Friday night, headed up to, I got to wake up pretty early. Got to get up at like 5, headed up to Philly in the morning. Got to drive over to Long Beach Island, LBI, New Jersey. My buddy's getting married this weekend. So no Saturday show. I'll have everything for you Sunday to recap the draft, but I will neglect drinking some of the cold ones I want to drink tomorrow night so I can give you a show, because come on, I love you guys, and I'm not going to, not give you content on night 2 of the draft, knowing that going to be pretty intriguing to see what Carolina decides to do at 57 and at 74. So I'll talk to you guys on Friday night.